Number 3, explore how data can be used to deliver more relevant and impactful communication. And so what I previously described might have been a little bit more technical and high level and a little bit abstract in terms of how we utilize a lot of these different data sources to identify segments and do more targeted marketing. It really is not that complicated when you start to drill down into it. There are essentially, different facets and things that we can kind of look at that are really going to be useful for us as marketers to be able to identify people at the right time with the right kind of message. And to be able to use those different data sources is increasingly easy for marketers to be able to use. It really takes, if anything, just the time and discipline to sit down and think about what are some of the different data points that can really enable more targeted communication. And so a couple of examples that we can look at are if I know somebody's type of device, where somebody is, their location, the time that people are going to be looking at my advertising, what behavior that people may have taken that could trigger a relevant message from me, some of the data that I might already know about my existing customers or second-party platforms might have that I can use for my own advertising, and context. What are other people doing right now that I can make assumptions about in the medium when we look at some native advertising opportunities for marketers? So I'm going to go through each one of these 6 different areas and kind of illustrate how some of these different data points can actually be really, really interesting ways to target customers with very relevant communication. The first one is device. And we're able to know through a lot of the targeting technology that we use for advertising what kind of device is being used to view the advertising that we have in market. And so we're able to say, hey, I only want this advertising to be seen by people on a desktop, or I only want this advertising to be seen by somebody that's on a smartphone. And that's really helpful because there may be different kinds of campaigns that really would only work if I knew I was only able to reach one kind of audience. And the example that I'm showing here does that. And so this particular kind of campaign is designed to be able to increase awareness and listening of Adobe Podcasts. And so rather than running a broad advertising campaign that would be a display ad that would encourage people to click through and look at a landing page, here they're able to target only those people that are on smartphones, and the call to action here isn't going to a landing page, but it clicks you and deep links you into the podcast app to be able to start to download and listen to some of the content that they're promoting. This would not have been efficient or really possible if we're not able to target based on device. The next data point is location, and this is a very powerful data point to tap into from a marketing perspective. And there could be a lot of different opportunities to be able to use this. The example that I'm showing here is through a popular navigation application called Waze, where in this case it's providing directions to a destination, and they sell advertising to a lot of retailers or in this case quick service restaurants to be able to advertise en route while someone might be going. So it's triggered based on the proximity of where a user is to, in this case, the store that they want to drive people to. Proximity can also use in as simple as search advertising. And so once you get into a lot of the different display ads that you might be running or the search ads that you might be running, you're able to identify individual postal codes and geographical radiuses where you only want your advertising to be able to be noticed. And so it's a great way to be able to avoid wastage if you have advertising and you don't want to pay for it if it's outside of a certain kind of area. And you're starting to see a little bit more things like beacon technology and mobile notifications happening that are really triggered the closer you get to a particular destination or a marker for a brand. So location continues to be a really, really powerful data point that can be used for more relevant targeting and communication. Another data point that we would use, and has been used for media planning for many, many years, is time. And if we're able to understand exactly when somebody's looking at our advertising, what we want to communicate could be changed to be even more relevant. And so the example that I'm showing here is a real extreme example where you actually have the same product, in this case, just a plain old bowl of yogurt, but the way that it's actually promoted in the morning is quite different than when the display advertising is running in the evening. And so in the morning it's about breakfast, in the evening it's about dessert. And so that's a very extreme example where the same product could be communicated differently at different times of the day, but it can also just apply to, different days of the week, different months of the year. And so when is it most relevant for you to be advertising? And are there particular sort of moments or days or time where it's even more powerful, or you may want to tweak the message to be even more relevant to those that are receiving it? Behavior is another increasingly powerful way that we can start to understand what triggers are happening, what behaviors that customers are taking that we might respond to through digital advertising. And so we're probably all seen the same example where you may have looked at something on a website or put it in your shopping cart, and advertising, in this case retailers, are seemingly stalking you around the internet, trying to get you to buy what you expressed some interest in a previous session on the website. Where frustration comes in, I think, from the consumer's perspective, is when you continue to see those ads even after the time you've made a decision or made a purchase. There's another opportunity that's less exploited to the degree that it probably could be, and that is sequencing messages. And so you might be able to change the messages that customers are seeing over time. And so they're not the same messages that you're kind of bombarding with the customer when you're retargeting them, in this case, maybe after they've left their website, but you might have a sequence of messages that you want them to see to tell a little bit of a story and build some momentum to bring them coming back. And so it's interesting to think about what are some of those other signals or behaviors that might be happening with customers of ATB that might trigger a response in this form of digital advertising. User data is another really powerful way that we've talked a little bit about in terms of targeting the right kind of people with the right kind of message at the right kind of moment. And there's really two types of user data that can be looked at. One is explicit data, and this would be the type of data that an individual customer would explicitly be providing to a retailer or an organization or a bank: their name, their age, their address, their interests. But there might also be implicit data, and these would be assumptions or educated guesses that you're making about particular types of audiences based on some of their behavior that they may have taken. So all of these together can be really powerful cues around who these segments are and what they might be most interested in. And so you can start to segment out and only reach those people that have expressed interest in certain things. One of the ways that publishers and a lot of media platforms are kind of enabling marketers to be able to use user data is providing dynamic creative formats. And that's kind of a fancy way of saying ads that can be dynamically populated with different kinds of content and text based on who they're going to be served to. So in this particular case, this is from Jasper's Hotel. It's using a dynamic creative format from Facebook. And if you were seeing this advertisement, I might be seeing this advertisement, and we might see actual different benefit statements, different call to actions, and different pricing based on the different profiles and user data that Facebook knows about us. So dynamic creative can be a powerful way to be able to serve increasingly relevant advertising based on what we know, both explicit and implicit, about the people that we're reaching with our communication. And finally, context. How can I increase the relevance if I know what the customer wants? And this area of advertising is probably most associated with native advertising, or partnerships that brands could explore to be able to have their brands present in other publications in a way that feels natural. Advertorials are another example that can be used quite commonly in this area of contextual advertising. I like this example from Spotify because I continue to think that they do some really innovative things with their brand partners. This is for a television show, and this television show was promoted by having different playlists associated with different characters within the show within the Spotify platform. And so they weren't advertising a show and trying to bring them out to the advertising show's website. They were finding a way to be able to use context to be able to kind of lean into some of those areas that they know that their audience is interested in this case being present in Spotify, which shares a lot of audience between the people that would likely be interested, in this case, to the show called Stranger Things, and some of the music that they might be listening to within that native platform. So context can be a really interesting thing. It can be a little bit more kind of challenging to be able to kind of set up with a publisher, but when you find the right kind of publisher with an audience that you might want to be able to reach, it could be really, really interesting what some of those possibilities might be. Number 4, align creative communication with the nature of different digital media canvases. And so when you look at highly effective digital marketing campaigns, one of the things that they have in common is a lot of the way that they've developed the creative that's being used in a lot of the different channels has been made specifically for that channel. And so you see this a little bit in smartphones as an example. The first generation mobile banners were really just sort of click-throughs, and so they were replicating what display advertising looked like at desktop. But now you're seeing some really interesting ways that marketers and agencies and brands are looking at how you can build really interesting mobile advertising experiences, but are really designed for mobile. And so rather than just, clicking through to be able to see a landing page, some of the call to actions are really kind of native to some of the technology and uniqueness of the smartphone experience. And so some of the call to actions might be around tilting, swiping, shaping, and looking at a mobile ad as an example that would connect to a location. And so how can we really design a great experience for mobile and not just kind of take an ad that might be developed for desktop or another medium and try to fit it into this medium? Let's start designing creative that really aligns to how it's going to be consumed by the audience that we want to be able to reach.